Thank you, Madam Speaker. For the last 3 years, this government has been shelling out millions of dollars for reports whose recommendations they ignore, then do whatever they wanted to do all along. Fire people, freeze funding, all while taking in ever-increasing transfer payments. The letter that Darlene Jackson wrote to the Minister of Health, quoted a nurse who said, quote, "I have 26 years of experience and I will honestly admit this is the worst I have ever seen," end quote. She went on to say that thousands of deletions have only made staffing shortages worse, and that patients are actually offering to change their own bandages because nurses don't have the time. 17 nurses told Dr. Peachy that they opposed his plan, and he came away saying everything was fine. This sort of disconnect from reality is the sort of behaviour we've come to expect from the Premier, but is far from welcome in a supposed independent expert. Will the Premier admit that he made a mistake rehiring Dr. Peachy and scrap the plan that he developed for the NDP?
The Honourable First Minister.
Manitobans now have two political options if they wish the healthcare system to remain dead last in the country. They now have the second opposition joining with the first opposition to say go back, retreat, don't do anything. It's just too scary to do the heavy lifting. But they have one option if they want a government that is willing to try to improve a system that has failed patients and was increasingly failing patients in the province, and that option would be this government, Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Second Opposition on a supplementary question.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. A year ago this week, the Virgo report was released, a report into mental health and addictions, and I've spoken with many people across this province who are desperately frustrated because it is so hard to get access to either mental health or addictions treatment. It's not clear how any of the recommendations in this report are going to be implemented when this government is dismantling the very structures that are supposed to implement it. This government is dissolving AFM and eliminating the mental health branch from the Department of Health. These responsibilities are being passed to Shared Health, which is still under construction. How is this government going to implement the Virgo report when there is no one in place to do it?
Stop delaying.
The Honourable First Minister.
It's just a false preamble by design or by ignorance, I'm not sure which, but either way false. Rapid access to addictions medicine, Strongest Families Institute, rapid access to consultative expertise. We've moved on a dozen plus initiatives that were recommended by the Virgo report. We're continuing to make those changes which are necessary to take a system that was broken and heal that system. Madam Speaker.
The Honourable Leader of the Second Opposition on a final supplementary.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It's truly strange that the Premier is dead set on having an election and ignoring the fixed date election law when the healthcare system is in such a shambles. There was a recent report that addictions and mental health are both getting worse across all categories. But in the midst of this, the Premier wants to dismiss these concerns or change the subject or blame someone else for all of his own mistakes. I've spoken to countless people whose biggest concern is that this Premier doesn't listen or only listens to the man in the mirror. If the Premier calls an election, it will derail the work of the meth task force. Why does the Premier even want an election when he clearly has no interest in governing?
The Honourable First Minister.
I understand the member's reluctance to go to the polls, Madam Speaker. He's advocating for higher taxes on Manitoba small businesses. He's advocating for higher taxes on working families. He's advocating for higher taxes on seniors trying to make a go of it on a fixed income. He's advocating for higher costs for people who want to have to go to work or volunteer. He's advocating for higher taxes for basically everything. In fact, he's got a one-size-fits-all solution for every single problem, higher taxes. We don't agree with that, Madam Speaker. And if the member is going to continue to be afraid, I would expect, knowing his positions as I do, that fear would be well justified.